What do you think is the worst thing that can happen to a king? The king's two favorite horses die. His wife divorces him for his annoying snoring. The king has to flee for his life, leaving behind all of his luxurious things and worldly possessions. Well, maybe the last one isn't the worst, but it still sucks. When the king was born, he had no idea what his future held, especially when it came to love. And so here are the craziest royal scandals in history. Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. Who hasn't heard of Henry VIII? The man was an icon, a true legend with 6 wives and 1 set of balls. He liked to live large. In fact, his obsession with food was only rivaled by his obsession with impregnating women. The problem was he wanted to divorce Catherine of Aragon, his first wife, and marry Anne Boleyn. But this was impossible because Catherine hadn't actually signed the papers establishing that their marriage was invalidated. So Henry went to see Pope Clement VII to ask him to make the annulment official, but the Pope refused. And this led to a major scandal in England. When Henry learned that the Pope wasn't going to grant him an annulment, he severed ties with the Roman Catholic Church and declared himself supreme head of the Church of England. And that's how the Church of England was born. The next day after signing the declaration, Henry married Anne Boleyn, who had given birth to a stillborn child a few months before. And it didn't take long for her to get pregnant again. On July 6, 1533, she gave birth to Elizabeth, who would become Queen Elizabeth I. However, the marriage between Henry and Anne was far from perfect, and there were rumors about infidelity on both sides. This led to Anne being charged with adultery and incest, and she was executed in 1536. Henry's daughter, Princess Mary, and Catherine Parr. Catherine Parr was Henry's 6th wife and the only one to survive him. She was a smart woman who played the Game of Thrones better than anyone else. After Henry died in January 1547, she married Thomas Seymour, a dashing young nobleman who had been one of Henry's closest advisors. Now, if you want to know more about the scandalous affair between Catherine and Thomas, just look at the TV series The Tudors. Catherine became close to Mary, who was Henry's daughter with Catherine of Aragon. She helped Mary through her difficult years in exile, and they remained close throughout their lives. After Mary became queen, she named Catherine, one of her ladies of the Privy Chamber, and Catherine served her faithfully until her death in 1548. Charles II and Louise de la Vallière. Charles II's love life was a scandal in itself. He was known for his many mistresses, which caused a lot of gossip and intrigue at the French court. One of his most famous mistresses was Louise de la Vallière, who was the governess to his children. She was a beautiful woman who was also very intelligent and witty. Charles was so taken with her that he showered her with expensive gifts and allowed her to live in a luxurious apartment in the Palace of Versailles. Louise eventually became one of the most powerful women in France, and she used her influence to help Charles during the Franco-Dutch War. When the war ended, Charles was forced to flee to Normandy, where he lived in exile for several years. During this time, he continued to send money and gifts to Louise, and he made sure that she was well taken care of. After Charles II returned to power, he continued to have affairs with other women, but he never forgot Louise de la Vallière. He kept her in his good graces and made sure that she was always treated with respect. Napoleon and Josephine. Napoleon Bonaparte was one of the most powerful men in Europe, and he was known for his military genius and his ambition. But behind the scenes, he was a man in love, and his relationship with his wife, Josephine, was a scandal in itself. They met when Napoleon was a young artillery officer, and Josephine was a beautiful young woman who was already married to a wealthy landowner. But Napoleon was not deterred by her marital status, and he began a passionate affair with her. Soon after, Napoleon and Josephine were married, and they had 2 children together. But their relationship was not without its problems. Josephine was a socialite who loved to party, and Napoleon was often jealous of her friends and admirers. He was also known for his infidelities, and he had a number of mistresses during his lifetime. Despite the scandals that plagued their relationship, Napoleon and Josephine remained married until his death in 1821. James I and the Peaky Blinders. James I came to power in troubled times. England was torn between two factions, the Stuarts and the Claudes, and there was a civil war raging. The Scottish coronation of James VI, his son, added fuel to the fire, and things were looking pretty bleak for James I. But then something amazing happened. The English Civil War came to an end with the execution of King Charles I. This left the throne open once again, and James I was invited to return to England and become the new king. He accepted the offer and became the King of Bling. But he wasn't done with Scotland yet. He returned to Edinburgh in disguise and raised an army of 10,000 men to invade England. It was a risky move, but it paid off, and James I became the King of Bling Bling. He returned to London in triumph and was crowned King of England. James I was a controversial figure, and he faced many challenges during his reign. But he was also a charismatic leader, and he won the support of many people in England. He was particularly popular in Scotland, where he was seen as a champion of Presbyterianism. James I died in 1625 and was succeeded by his son Charles I. Edward VIII and Mrs. Simpson. Edward VIII was the Prince of Wales for over 60 years, and he was known for his love of luxury and his playboy lifestyle. But in 1936, he did something that shocked the world. He abdicated the throne in order to marry a divorced woman named Wallis Simpson. Edward met Wallis Simpson in 1918, and they began a romantic relationship. However, their affair was kept secret for many years because Wallis was married to a British diplomat. When Wallis's husband died in 1928, Edward began to pursue her more aggressively. He showered her with expensive gifts and took her on lavish vacations to places like France and Italy. In 1934, Edward and Wallis became engaged, but the British government intervened and pressured him to break off the engagement. Edward refused and went ahead with the wedding anyway. The scandal caused a constitutional crisis in Britain, and Edward was forced to choose between his love for Wallis and his duty to the crown. Ultimately, he chose Wallis and abdicated the throne in December 1936. His younger brother, George VI, then became king. Edward and Wallis were married in 1937, and they lived happily ever after. Which royal scandal was your favorite? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this.